Is this the most 1980s stereo system you've ever seen or what? It's like a combination of Knight Rider, Tron, and Miami Vice. It has the blacked out look with red accents, 3D wireframe graphics with the road disappearing into the horizon, and of course all these fabulous pastel colors. It fits right in with the Atari XE game system.
That's why I brought the Fruit Boots.
It also has an amplifier with dual slider volume controls, a 5-band graphic equalizer, a double cassette deck with soft eject, and obligatory high-speed dubbing, an AM/FM radio tuner, and a vacuum fluorescent digital clock display with sleep timer and alarm. And it looks even cooler in the dark because that's when you can see the lighted volume control, the lighted tuning dial pointer, and the various indicator lights for all the functions it has. And if you crank up the volume, you can see what it calls the stereo intensity meter. There's 2 incandescent light bulbs in there, one for each channel. So that's the left channel, that's the right channel. And if you turn up the volume, they begin to flicker and glow. I unfortunately did not get it with the original matching speakers, but I did get it with the original matching belt drive auto return turntable, which even included a copy of its original instructions. And it even still has the protective film on the decal. I'm sure the audiophiles watching this are going to call it black plastic crap, but that's not the point. If you had this back in the 80s, you would have been the coolest kid on the block. Yes, it's from that brand everyone loves to hate, Sound Design. And it's not actually a stereo system, it's an audio core. On the back we can see its Sound Design model number 5967. It has 8 ohm speaker outputs, an input for a turntable with a ceramic phono cartridge, 2 line level inputs, one marked TV, other one marked CD/aux, terminals for an external FM antenna, or you can use a built-in antenna, a power output for the included turntable, supplying 12 volts DC, center positive, and of course the power cord, and it was made in Taiwan. I now have it connected to a small pair of RCA bookshelf speakers, and it sounds surprisingly good through them, although to be fair, these are probably a lot better than the speakers it originally came with. It has surprisingly good sound quality and reception on both AM and FM.
Angela. So when the night falls, my lonely heart calls.
That's an appropriately 80s tune to play on this system.
11:70 a.m. Bridgewater. Aapki choice.
ABC Radio, Aapki choice.
And now it's on AM.
When the lights go down in the city.
That actually sounds really good for AM. As you can hear, the cassette player also works and sounds fine now, although initially it did have a problem, so I'll show you what was wrong with it and how I fixed it. The left side cassette deck works.
In heaven there is no beer. That's why we drink it here.
But the right side deck, it doesn't rewind, it doesn't fast forward. It will play, but if I let it go for more than a few seconds,
and when we're gone from here,
it's going to eat my tape because the take-up reel is not turning. As I expected, it has the typical Tanishan style mechanism with one motor to run both decks. And actually, the belts are perfectly fine. So I wondered what the problem was until I realized I could hear some parts rattling around inside this cabinet when I was moving it around. And I found this, a spring and a white plastic cap. And that is part of this clutch mechanism. You can see that one is still intact, but this one popped off. The reason why that happens is because over time the plastic shrinks while the metal post it's sitting on stays the same size. So eventually the plastic cracks, and when that happens, the pressure of the spring causes that white plastic cap to pop off, and then you have loose parts flying around inside your cassette player. And in this case, when this wheel becomes loose, it no longer works. And here's a look at the main circuit board. This part is the radio tuner with the built-in AM antenna, the tuning capacitor, and then over here is all the cassette recorder electronics. There's the recording switch, which gets activated when you press record. And here's the amplifier, the heatsink on the amplifier chips. I found a 1987 date code on one of the ICs on the circuit board, which is exactly what I expected based on this system's styling. So first I'm going to try to just put this spring and the plastic cap back into place, see if it holds at all. And if it does, no, it's just popping off because that plastic cap got cracked. The pressure of the spring is too much. There you can see how it's cracked all the way to the center, so I won't be able to reuse this, so I'll need to find a replacement for it. Here is hopefully what will be the solution. 2 brand new, never used, generic Tanishan style cassette mechanisms that I got for the sole purpose of scavenging parts off of them. And these do have that same kind of clutch mechanism, or at least it looks the same. You never know if they might have modified the design over the years, so we'll see if it'll be compatible between a brand new cassette mechanism made today and one from the 1980s. Okay, here we go, gently trying to pry off the cap. That was pretty easy. So there's the new cap and spring. Now I'll try putting the new spring and the new cap on the old 1980s mechanism. Hey, look at that. I think it might work. First, let's just make sure the left side deck still works. This is the one that still has its original spring and cap in the clutch mechanism, but I did add a drop of glue to make sure it stays in place.
A few brief excerpts from some of the more than 300 articles you would have heard on NewsTrack if you'd been a subscriber.
Okay, it plays, it fast forwards, and it rewinds. So that appears to still be working fine. Now let's try the one we fixed with the parts transplanted from the brand new mechanism.
On NewsTrack if you'd been a subscriber during this past year, including useful information about the tax-saving aspects of Clifford trusts.
Plays, it fast forwards, and it rewinds. There's one feature this thing brags about more than anything else: high-speed dubbing, high dubbing speed, high-speed dubbing, HSD, high-speed dubbing. So of course I have to give that a try. So I'm going to put my source tape and the playback deck and the most 80s looking blank cassette and the recording deck. And surprisingly, there's one feature this thing has which it does not mention, and that is synchro start dubbing. That's where you press pause and then record on the recording deck, but you notice it's not moving yet until you press play, which will immediately release the pause and start recording.
It's important to inhale through your mouth to make sure that enough oxygen reaches your hard working muscles.
And here's what the final result sounds like.
It's important to inhale through your mouth to make sure that enough oxygen reaches your hard working muscles.
Kinda shrill and warbly sounding, but that's what you would expect for a high-speed dubbing copy on a system like this. And even at normal speed, this is never going to do that great of a job at recording because it only has automatic level control, it does not have Dolby noise reduction, and it does not properly support recording on chrome or metal tapes. But for playing pre-recorded tapes, I think it does a perfectly respectable job. I'll give you a direct hookup sample of what that sounds like.
Can't you see? I've got to be me. Me, not you. Can't be what you want me to. Gotta live my own life. Make my own mistakes. Figure out what I'm after. Do whatever it takes. Can't you see?
Now let's take a closer look at this plastic fantastic turntable. This may look like a rubber platter mat on a metal platter, but it's entirely made of hard plastic, and this is just painted and engraved to kind of look more fancy than it really is. The tone arm is also entirely made of plastic, and what may look like a counterweight in the back is just a decoration. And yes, this is your old friend, the Chuo Denshi CZ800 ceramic phono cartridge, used on about 1 million different modern Crosley Victrola type record players today, but they were already using this back in 1987. And in case you're wondering about the tracking force, it's about 5.7 grams, which is on the heavy side, but it is within the recommended range for this cartridge, and in normal use it won't damage your records. And that's actually pretty light compared to this record, which recommends 8 to 10 grams. The turntable mechanism is mounted on springs to dampen vibrations, and as typical, there's a transport screw back here to lock it down when you're moving it. But I'm glad I found the included instructions because there's actually a second hidden transport screw underneath the platter. And the way you get to that is there's a little hole here. You rotate it to the back corner here, and then you stick in a small screwdriver and turn it to release the second transport screw, which the previous owner of this never did. So I don't know if they either never used this turntable or they used it but they didn't release that transport screw. Some turntables have large rubber feet which you can turn to adjust the height to help level the turntable, but of course these are fake. That's just part of the plastic molding, although you do get little rubber feet in the middle. It has a cooling vent for the motor, which is something you don't normally see. And here's the sticker, record player, model number 0908CP. 12 volts DC, 70 milliamps maximum. Assembled in the USA, record player made in Taiwan or Mexico. Another sticker here showing a date code of January 1988, although it looks like it wasn't inspected by anybody. And if we remove the bottom cover, we can see the mechanism, which is something I haven't seen this style before with this metal mechanism. As you can see by the sticker, this one was made in Mexico. I don't know by whom. Definitely does not look like a BSR based design. The motor was made by Matsushita with a September 1987 date code, and you can see the trimmers for adjusting the speed for 33 and 45. There are some good things about this turntable. One is that it has automatic return when the record is finished playing. And that motor is actually almost entirely silent in operation. A very good quality motor. And more importantly, Sound Design actually knew how to properly match the impedance of the ceramic cartridge, so it doesn't sound so dreadfully tinny like modern systems which use this cartridge. I'll give you a direct hookup sample of what it sounds like. So obviously this system is not going to please the audiophiles, but that's not the point. If you were a kid back in the 80s, you would have been thrilled to have this as your first stereo system. And it had to be made with some decent quality if it's all still working fine today, with just one minor repair to the cassette deck.